was a typical summer night when it happened. I remember it vividly, even though it's been years. I was 17, and like most nights during that summer, I had spent the entire day at my best friend's house. We were inseparable back then. My parents worked late, so I often hung out at her place to avoid being home alone. My friend's house was just a 20-minute walk from mine, so I made that trip almost daily. That night, my friend and I decided to watch a horror movie. It was one of those old, creepy films that leaves you feeling uneasy. By the time the movie ended, it was around 10 p.m. I said my goodbyes and started my walk home. It was dark and quiet, but I was used to it. Our suburban neighborhood was generally safe, and I never had any reason to be scared before. As I walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. I told myself it was just my imagination, probably the after effect of the horror movie. I kept walking, trying to focus on the familiar path. But then I heard footsteps behind me. At first, they were faint, almost in sync with mine. I tried to ignore it, but the more I listened, the more I was sure someone was there. I sped up my pace, hoping to get home faster. The footsteps grew louder and quicker, matching my speed. My heart was pounding, and I felt a surge of panic. I didn't want to turn around. I was scared of what I might see, but I knew I had to. I needed to know if it was real or just in my head. When I finally gathered the courage to turn around, I saw someone hiding behind a tree. Under the dim streetlights, I could make out the figure of a man. He was really old, but seemed in good shape. He was wearing pajamas, which made me more disturbed. Maybe he was drunk, I thought. He wasn't holding anything, and he didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, staring at me. My heart was racing. I didn't know what to do. Then, in a soft voice, he said, "You look beautiful." That was it. Nothing else. His words sent a chill down my spine. I was frozen for a moment, but then I snapped out of it and started running when he started moving towards me. I didn't look back. I could hear him walking slowly behind me, but I didn't stop. I ran as fast as I could until I reached my house. When I got inside, I locked the door and tried to catch my breath. I peeked through the window, but he was gone. I never saw him again after that night. For a long time, I didn't tell anyone about what happened, and never went back to my friend's house at night. The story I'm about to share happened years ago, but it still sends shivers down my spine whenever I think about it. I was still in college, living with my roommate, who happened to be my friend too. One night, she, her boyfriend, and I decided to hit a club downtown. I wanted to give them some privacy, so after a while, I left them and went to the upper floor of the club. Upstairs, it was quieter. I found a seat at the bar and started people watching. A handsome guy, maybe in his mid-30s, came up to me. He introduced himself to me. He was really charming, and we started chatting. After some time, he offered to buy me a drink. He seemed nice enough, so I accepted. We kept talking, and I remember feeling at ease. But the last thing I remember clearly is finishing my drink with him. The next thing I knew, I woke up in my apartment with a terrible headache. My roommate was sitting next to me, looking terrified. My roommate told me that she had come upstairs looking for me after her boyfriend had to leave early because of a family emergency. She saw me almost passed out, leaning on a guy she had never seen me with. He was trying to take me out of the club. When she confronted him, he claimed not knowing that she was actually my friend and told her that I was his fiancé and had just had too much to drink. She really got angry and threatened him to call the police. He got defensive, but when he saw how serious she was, he pretended he was going to make a call and went outside. He never came back. She managed to get me home safely. She stayed up all night to make sure I was okay. To this day, I don't know what he really put in my drink and how he did it. I also hate to think of what could have happened to me if my roommate hadn't saved me that day. I was about 10 when it happened. The memory has stayed with me all these years, haunting me. My parents had been invited to a family dinner across town, and I didn't feel like going. I wanted to stay home and play video games. We lived in a suburban neighborhood, quiet and a bit secluded. It felt safe, usually. I remember that night clearly. My parents left around 6 p.m. I settled in the living room, snacks and drinks within reach, and started playing. Time flew by, and soon it was dark outside. The house was silent, except for the sounds from my game. I was totally absorbed when I heard a noise coming from downstairs. At first, I thought it might be my parents coming home early, but when I looked out the window, I saw a man standing at our front door. He was wearing thin clothing and was barefoot. He looked like he didn't belong there. The man was fiddling with the door, trying to unlock it with something that looked like a key. My heart raced. He hadn't seen me yet, so I stayed still, hoping he'd go away. Then he noticed me. He started knocking on the window really hard with that key, shouting for me to open the door. His voice was rough and desperate. I was terrified. I ran straight to my parents' room and locked the door behind me. With shaking hands, I called my dad. I tried to keep my voice steady, but I was too scared. He told me to stay put and called the police. The police arrived quickly. I heard their sirens and then their voices outside. When I finally came out of the room, the man was gone. The police searched the area, but found nothing. They said he was probably a junkie, high and confused. After that night, I had trouble staying home alone. I would hear noises, and my heart would start racing again. I didn't move out of my parents' house for a long time. The fear just wouldn't go away. Whenever I think back to that night, I can still see his face, hear the knocking, and feel the same cold fear